The 11-year-old black girl, Kayla Brooks, tech wunderkind and founder of the billion-dollar education startup Dreamscape, stepped aboard to find her first-class seat occupied by a middle-aged white man. Seconds later, the plane shuddered violently as the captain's cold, decisive voice boomed through the cabin. "This flight will return to the gate. Security officers will come on board." Kayla froze in the aisle as every eye turned toward her. Tears welled in her eyes as she gripped her boarding pass. Seat 2A, now held hostage by Matthew Barnes, a scowling white man who refused to look at anyone but the flight attendant standing beside him. "I paid for a first-class ticket," he ground out, chest puffed with entitlement. "And I'm not giving up my seat for some inconvenience." His use of the word inconvenience hung in the air, heavy with condescension. What no one on board yet realized was that this seemingly small dispute would ignite a chain of seismic events, exposing dark agendas and entrenched biases, and change the lives of everyone involved forever. The first-class cabin on the Detroit to San Francisco flight had gleamed under soft lighting and smelled faintly of vanilla. That peace evaporated the moment Kayla stepped in. At 11, she was hard to miss, not only because of her youth, but because she was celebrated worldwide as the teenage founder of Dreamscape, an ed tech company valued at billions. With practiced composure, Kayla held up her pass for Seat 2A, a window seat she always requested on business trips. But as she approached, her heart skipped when she saw a stranger firmly planted in her spot. He was in his 50s, tailored in an expensive suit, salt and pepper hair immaculately styled. He looked at Kayla as if she were nothing more than a minor annoyance. Kayla drew a steadying breath and spoke softly. "Sir, I think you're in the wrong seat. Seat 2A is mine." The man, later identified as Matthew Barnes, slowly looked up, his cold gray eyes sizing her up with disdain. A heavy silence fell before he curled one lip in a smirk. "Sweetheart, you must be mistaken. This is first class, not a playground for children." Passengers nearby turned to watch. A flight attendant stepped forward, her tone polite but firm. "Is there a problem, sir?" Kayla offered her pass, voice calm but resolute. "This is my ticket for Seat 2A. The attendant examined it, then faced Matthew with a professional yet serious smile. "Sir, this young lady has a confirmed first-class ticket for 2A. May I see your boarding pass, please?" Matthew produced his, clearly for 12C, an Economy Plus seat. His brow furrowed as if reality offended him. "I always sit here," he snapped. "There must be a mistake. You need to move me." "I'm sorry, sir," the attendant replied patiently. "First class is fully booked today. You'll need to return to your assigned seat so we can depart." Matthew's face hardened, wounded pride flashing across his features. "You're asking me, a platinum member, to give up my seat for a child? What does a kid know about the value of first class?" His words landed like a small explosion in the hushed cabin. Kayla felt the weight of his insult, but refused to flinch, meeting his gaze steadily. "Sir, I understand the value of this seat. I earned it myself." He laughed scornfully, dismissing the notion that a young black girl could possibly deserve what he believed was reserved for people like him. "I don't care who you are," he spat. "I'm not moving." Whispers rippled through first class as passengers exchanged uneasy glances and discreetly raised phones to record the confrontation. Kayla steadied herself, hurt but determined to hold on to her dignity. She had faced prejudice before, each time feeling that familiar grip around her heart. Then a deep, authoritative voice resonated from behind. It was her father, Sean Brooks, who had been quietly observing. He stepped forward, protective yet composed to a chilling degree. "Mr. Barnes," Sean said, voice unwavering, "my daughter's ticket for this seat was booked long ago. We will not negotiate. Please remove yourself from her seat immediately." Matthew looked up at Sean, defiance sparking in his eyes. "Is that so? We'll see who blinks first." The two men stood locked in a tense standoff, neither willing to yield. The entire cabin held its breath. This flight hadn't even left the ground, but a storm had already erupted in first class. An invisible storm of tension descended over first class as Matthew Barnes and Sean Brooks locked eyes with the intensity of two warriors sizing each other up. Sean felt the weight pressing down on his shoulders. He glanced at his daughter, Kayla, standing perfectly still. Small, yet unbreakable, her bright eyes refusing to look away even for a single second. Taking a deep breath to steady his voice, Sean stared directly at Matthew, his gaze fierce yet controlled. "I'll say this one last time, Mr. Barnes. That seat belongs to my daughter. Here is her boarding pass, booked and paid for over a month ago." Sean held out the printed e-ticket, passenger name, and C2A clearly highlighted, along with the payment receipt. Every name and number leapt off the page. Undeniable proof. Nearby, passengers began to murmur, their curious glances shifting toward indignation as they realized who was in the right. Matthew Barnes furrowed his brow, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face, only to harden again moments later as he spoke louder, stubbornly. "The problem isn't this piece of paper. I've been a loyal Platinum member for years, and I always sit in this seat. I can't believe a little girl actually needs first class. What a waste of resources." A few passengers exchanged uncomfortable looks at Matthew's tactless remark. Sean recognized then that this wasn't just about a seat, it was deeply rooted prejudice. To Matthew, a young black girl legitimately holding a first-class ticket was a personal affront. Sean's voice turned cold, each word carving through the cabin's tension. "Mr. Barnes, this isn't about your opinion of what's right or wrong. It's about my daughter's legal entitlement. If you refuse to move, we'll have to involve the crew or airport security." Matthew arched an eyebrow, defiance still in his tone but with a hint of realization that things had spiraled beyond his control. He exhaled sharply, sneering. "You're threatening me, Brooks? Watch your words. I'm not someone to be messed with." "I'm not threatening you," Sean replied calmly, his voice a steel blade, gentle but undeniably powerful. "I'm simply protecting my daughter's rightful seat." At that moment, the flight attendant standing nearby picked up on the escalating tension and spoke into her headset, calling for the purser. Seconds later, the purser appeared, flanked by a uniformed airport security officer whose expression was all business. "What seems to be the problem?" the purser asked, eyes scanning the scene alertly. Sean wasted no time. "This man is occupying my daughter's paid seat, 2A. He refuses to move and has repeatedly insulted her because of her age and skin color." The purser reviewed both Kayla's and Matthew's boarding passes, then turned to Barnes with polite firmness. "Sir, this is clearly your error. Your assigned seat is 12C, not 2A. Please relocate immediately to avoid further disturbance to other passengers." Matthew's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. He rose reluctantly, casting a hostile glare at Kayla and Sean. "You and your daughter will regret this. This isn't the last you've heard from me, Brooks." The chilling threat made Sean's heart skip a beat, but he didn't waver. Gently placing Kayla back in her rightful seat, he offered her a protective smile. "It's okay, sweetie. Everything's fine now." Kayla sat down, though her heart still pounded. She turned to her father, worry lingering in her eyes. "Do you really think he'll do something?" Sean managed a reassuring grin, even as he knew Barnes wasn't one to let things go easily. He leaned close and whispered, voice steady with resolve, "Whatever he does, I'm here. I will always protect you. Keep your head held high, my daughter." The first-class cabin fell into a tense silence once more. Curious, anxious eyes tracked every move of Kayla and her father. Everyone sensed this was far from over. What had begun as a simple seat dispute was now the opening salvo in a chain of events none of them could have predicted. An invisible storm still hung over first class as Matthew Barnes rose from seat 2A, his steps heavy with indignation and embarrassment. Passengers watched in silence, their eyes filled with reproach and judgment. Just then, a soft but firm voice broke the tension. "Hold on, Mr. Barnes." Matthew turned to see Helen Grant standing calmly. She was in her 60s, her silver hair elegantly styled, her gentle eyes sharp and kind. She'd been observing from the start, quietly attentive, and now she approached him with a polite smile. "I think I have a better solution," Helen said evenly. "I'll swap seats with you. Mine is 3B, also in first class, just a few rows back." The unexpected offer gave Matthew pause. He appraised the elegant woman before him skeptically. Though Helen looked every bit the seasoned traveler, he hesitated. With a doubtful shrug, he asked, "Why would you do that?" "This has nothing to do with you." Helen smiled serenely, unwavering. "Oh, but I think it concerns all of us. We're sharing this flight, Mr. Barnes. Any tension here affects every passenger on board. I trust you're polite enough to recognize that." Matthew glanced at the other passengers. Everyone was watching, curious and silently judging. He inhaled, trying to regain control. "I still don't see why swapping seats matters. The issue is that a child like which child?" Helen interrupted gently but pointedly, looking toward Kayla, who sat perfectly poised beside her father. "You mean the young black girl sitting here? A child doesn't deserve the same privileges you assume are yours?" Helen's deft question left Matthew speechless, a flush of shame creeping across his face. In that hush, the real problem was laid bare. It wasn't about the seat. It was his deep-seated bias. Several passengers around them began to nod in agreement, some whispering support for Helen. Sensing he was losing this battle, Matthew's tone turned defensive, faltering. "I didn't mean it like that. I just don't think a kid really needs—" Helen cut him off again, firm but kind. "Mr. Barnes, I wonder, if it were a well-dressed young white boy in that seat, would you have said the same thing?" Her respectful yet unyielding challenge left him floundering. Avoiding her steady gaze, he fell silent as the cabin held its breath. Finally, with a tense sigh, he conceded, "Fine. I'll switch seats with you." Helen offered a gracious nod and motioned him toward 3B. As he moved away, she settled into his abandoned seat, facing Kayla and Sean. Her warm eyes turned to Kayla with reassurance and encouragement. Sean Brooks looked at Helen gratefully and nodded his thanks. Helen only smiled and spoke softly to Kayla. "Sweetheart, always be proud of who you are and what you've achieved. Never let someone else's prejudice make you feel small." Kayla's eyes shimmered with emotion as she whispered her deep gratitude. "Thank you so much, Mom." Matthew sank into 3B, turning his back to Helen and Kayla, avoiding eye contact. But beneath his forced composure he felt a profound loss. Not just of a seat, but of the comfortable illusion that his prejudice would go unchallenged. As the flight prepared to taxi back to the gate, everyone sensed that this conflict was only the beginning of a much larger story. Helen Grant sat quietly, thoughtful, as if she alone grasped the deeper truths behind Matthew Barnes's arrogance. A far greater reckoning awaited them all. When the plane finally leveled off and the fasten seatbelt sign clicked off, the tension in the cabin eased, everywhere except seat 3B. Matthew Barnes felt no relief. Helen Grant's cutting words still reverberated in his mind, like invisible daggers slicing into the pride he'd always hidden behind a veneer of confidence and arrogance. He clenched his fist so tightly his knuckles whitened, staring out at the empty sky beyond the window. His heart pounded with a fury and humiliation he'd never known. How could he, an established, successful man, have been embarrassed in front of dozens of fellow passengers by an older woman and a little girl over something so trivial and shameful? In that moment, everything he'd built, his status, his power, his respect, felt threatened by the smallest, most humiliating of incidents. A dark thought flashed through his mind. Matthew slipped his phone from the inner pocket of his jacket, his hand trembling ever so slightly as he unlocked it. He glanced around. The other passengers were settling back into post-takeoff relaxation, oblivious to what he was about to do. Quietly, he rose from his seat and slipped toward the rear of the cabin, heading for the lavatory at the back. The door clicked shut behind him, and in that confined space his heartbeat sounded thunderous. He dialed. "Detroit Airport, Emergency Security Hotline, how may I assist you?" came a calm female voice on the other end. Matthew drew a slow, steadying breath, forcing a controlled tone, though his eyes burned with cold rage. "I'm calling from Flight 724 to San Francisco. I need to report a serious security issue. There's a young passenger on board using forged documents to occupy a first-class seat. I believe this may be part of a broader fraud scheme that could threaten flight safety." "Can you tell me more about this passenger?" she asked. He swallowed hard, steeling himself. His voice went icy with certainty. "Her name is Kayla Brooks. She's an African-American girl. I suspect she's not only using fake credentials but may be involved in financial fraud. I demand immediate verification. This is a critical security matter." He hung up and felt his pulse hammering in his wrists. For a moment, guilt flickered through him, then was snuffed out by his anger and wounded pride. To Matthew, this wasn't just revenge. It was proof that he still controlled every situation he walked into. Just minutes later, the captain's voice crackled over the PA with grave urgency, shattering the cabin calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've received a credible security report. We must return immediately and make an emergency landing at Oakland International for verification. Please remain seated. We apologize for the inconvenience." A ripple of alarm passed through the cabin. Kayla turned to her father, genuine confusion and worry for the first time clouding her expression. Sean Brooks gripped her hand tightly, a cold knot of dread forming in his chest. "Dad, something's wrong," Kayla whispered. A few rows back, Helen Grant shot a glance at Matthew, who had quickly averted his eyes toward his phone. She sensed something sinister lurking beneath his composed facade. Concern and suspicion flickered across her features as she pieced together what must have happened. The plane banked sharply and began its descent, tension mounting by the second. 15 minutes later, Flight 724 touched down on Oakland's runway in a heavy hush. As soon as the aircraft came to a full stop, the cabin doors swung open, and two security officers, flanked by a sharply dressed man in a suit, stepped into the aisle. "Passenger Kayla Brooks, please stand and accompany us," one officer announced in a firm, detached tone. "We've received a report concerning the authenticity of your travel documents." Kayla froze, a chill running down her spine. She looked to her father with terrified eyes. Sean leapt to his feet, protective fury in his gaze as he faced the officers. "There's been a mistake. My daughter is fully legal. Her paperwork has been verified." "We are following standard procedure, Mr. Brooks. Please cooperate," the other officer replied curtly. The entire cabin fell silent, watching this unprecedented scene unfold. Kayla's legs trembled, yet she forced herself to stand tall, her face composed though her heart raced. She caught sight of Matthew Barnes turning away, deliberately avoiding her eyes. Sean moved to her side, his voice low and threatening. "I'm coming with her. You're not taking my daughter alone." The officers nodded and allowed Sean to accompany Kayla off the plane. Every passenger watched their steps, riveted by the dramatic turn of events. Behind them, Matthew sat motionless, lips pressed into a thin line. Yet in his eyes there was a fleeting glimmer of regret and unease. He was just beginning to grasp how dangerously his impulsive act could spiral out of control. A storm far greater than he'd ever imagined was gathering on the horizon, and even he couldn't predict just how devastating its fallout would be. As Kayla and Sean descended the aircraft stairs, the biting wind at Oakland Airport felt like a stark warning that their situation was far more serious than they'd realized. Kayla pressed close to her father, bracing herself, though her heart thudded with growing unease. At the bottom of the stairs stood a woman in a crisp black suit, an FBI badge gleaming on her lapel under the floodlights. Agent Laura Davis, her gaze sharp and expression resolute, walked straight toward them without hesitation. "Mr. Sean Brooks and Miss Kayla Brooks, I'm FBI Special Agent Laura Davis," she announced crisply, studying their faces for every flicker of emotion. "We've received a report that Miss Brooks used forged documents to board first class and that there may be financial fraud involved. We must investigate immediately under national security protocols." Each word struck Kayla like thunder. Her heart jolted with fear as she looked up at her father, eyes wide with panic, realizing for the first time how small and vulnerable she felt under these terrifying accusations. Sean stepped forward, positioning himself protectively in front of his daughter. He met Agent Davis's eyes without flinching, voice steady and sincere. "Agent Davis, I assure you this is a baseless accusation. All of my daughter's identification and records are completely legitimate. Her company, Dreamscape, has never shown any financial or legal irregularities." Agent Davis arched an eyebrow, professional yet intrigued by Sean's calm, forceful response. She motioned to a colleague, handing her a tablet loaded with the report. "We have a specific, urgent tip claiming she boarded with fraudulent documents and may be involved in suspicious financial transactions at Dreamscape. This isn't a routine allegation, Mr. Brooks." Sean's breath hitched, but he held firm, passion rising in his voice. "That accusation is outright slander. My daughter, Kayla Brooks, built Dreamscape on genuine talent. Every investment and grant is transparent and fully audited. I demand the FBI trace the origin of this report." Agent Davis's gaze softened slightly as she looked to Kayla. Her tone remained professional, but gentler. "Miss Brooks, could you tell me the purpose of your trip to San Francisco?" Kayla swallowed hard, striving for calm. Her voice was small but clear. "I'm meeting with the investment board of Sun Capital Ventures. My company, Dreamscape, will present plans to expand our digital education program for underserved communities worldwide." Agent Davis listened in silence, her face unreadable, yet her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt about the earlier allegation. She pressed on, cautious but thorough. "Do you have documentation confirming that meeting?" Kayla immediately retrieved a neatly organized binder from her backpack, containing the meeting agenda. an official invitation from Sun Capital Ventures, and relevant details. Agent Davis examined each page, her expression softening further as she reviewed the evidence. Sean seized the moment, voice firmer now that a path to clearing his daughter's name had opened. If necessary, I can provide all financial transaction records, public audit reports, and valid identification on the spot. My daughter may be young, but we maintain absolute transparency. This accusation clearly aims to sabotage her reputation in business. Special Agent Davis studied them thoughtfully. She recognized from experience that this was no ordinary claim. It appeared someone had weaponized security procedures to damage Kayla's personal and professional standing. "Mr. Brooks, Miss Brooks," she said slowly, "I understand your concern and frustration. We have a duty to verify every report thoroughly. Please come with us to the office so we can complete this verification as quickly as possible." Sean nodded without hesitation, gently placing his hand on Kayla's shoulder to reassure her in a voice she could hear. "It's all right, sweetie. We've done nothing wrong. The truth will come out." Kayla gave a small nod, relief mingled with lingering hurt that her success had brought them into this ordeal. At the aircraft window, Matthew Barnes watched discreetly. His heart pounded with remorse, and beneath that, a growing fear. He had unleashed a storm beyond his control, one that could shatter everything he'd built, including himself. The office door at Oakland Airport had barely clicked shut behind them when Agent Laura Davis was about to resume her questioning that the sound of hurried footsteps pounded in from the hallway. Within seconds, the door burst open, revealing a young woman in a sharply tailored business suit, her black hair perfectly neat, and her eyes blazing with determination. It was Rachel Kim, the Brooks family's attorney, who had stood by them through every complex legal battle over the years. "Sorry I'm late," Rachel said as she stepped into the room, her gaze sweeping quickly over Kayla and Sean before giving Agent Davis a reassuring nod. "I'm Rachel Kim, counsel for the Brooks family and Dreamscape. I have some crucial information regarding the allegations the FBI is now investigating." Agent Davis raised an eyebrow, signaling Rachel to continue. Rachel flipped open her briefcase, withdrew a thick file folder, and handed it to Davis with a steady, professional confidence. "This is all the evidence our team has gathered over the past few weeks. Our internal investigation shows that the accusations against Kayla aren't an isolated incident. They're part of a tightly organized, malicious conspiracy, orchestrated by Global Tech, Inc." At the mention of Global Tech, Agent Davis couldn't hide her surprise. She leafed through the marked-up documents, charts and internal emails highlighted in red, all pointing to a secret strategy aimed at dismantling promising tech startups, especially those led by people of color and young founders. Rachel continued, her voice firm and persuasive. 3 months ago, Global Tech offered to buy Dreamscape at a fraction of its true value. When Kayla and her team refused, they immediately labeled Dreamscape a threat to be neutralized, determined to eliminate any future competition. Sean Brooks clenched his fists, his face darkening as he remembered that tense meeting where Global Tech executives had sneered at the 11-year-old Kayla, insisting she accept a paltry sum as if they were doing her a favor. Rachel pressed on. "We've uncovered multiple similar incidents where Global Tech used its power to pressure other young, minority-led founders. They're not just after their technology. They're intent on crushing any small but promising competitor." Agent Davis looked up, her eyes now steeled with resolve. "Ms. Kim, you're saying today's false security report is directly tied to Global Tech?" Rachel nodded emphatically. "Exactly. Matthew Barnes, the man who called in that bogus alert, is actually a senior director at NextGen Systems, a subsidiary of Global Tech. His presence on Kayla's flight wasn't a coincidence. They tracked her schedule and waited for the perfect moment to attack her reputation and dreamscapes. Kayla felt a chill run through her veins. She'd known success in youth attracted challenges, but never imagined she'd become the target of such a calculated, sinister plot. She gripped her father's hand and her attorney's, her heart torn between hurt and rage. Sean spoke up, his voice unwavering. "Agent Davis, you see now this isn't a simple misunderstanding. It's a premeditated attempt to destroy my daughter's business and her reputation. I urge the FBI to pursue this aggressively and put an end to these schemes." Agent Davis paused, her fingers brushing the edge of Rachel's dossier. With the instincts of a veteran agent, she recognized the case's enormity. Her expression hardened as she made her decision. "I understand the severity. I'll notify our regional office immediately and recommend a full-scale investigation. The FBI will hold those responsible accountable." Rachel exhaled, turning to Kayla and Sean with a look of unwavering determination. "We'll get through this. Kayla, you're not alone, and Dreamscape will not bow to bullies like Global Tech." Kayla nodded, feeling a glimmer of relief for the first time that day. Yet deep down, she knew this battle was only beginning. Global Tech wasn't just any corporation. They were a force that wielded money and influence to control markets, and they wouldn't stop until Dreamscape was sidelined. Meanwhile, elsewhere in Oakland, Matthew Barnes received word from his superiors at Global Tech that the FBI was closing in. His heart clenched with panic. He realized he was nothing more than a pawn, a disposable piece on a ruthless corporate chessboard. And now, more than ever, he understood that he had ignited a war he couldn't easily escape. Just as Special Agent Laura Davis snapped Rachel's file shut, the sound of measured yet firm footsteps echoed outside the office, accompanied by the low murmur of a brief exchange between FBI staff and someone new. The door eased open to reveal Helen Grant's composed, elegant face, sharp-eyed, with a quietly determined air beneath her polished demeanor. "I'm sorry to intrude," Helen said softly, casting Agent Davis a steady look free of any hesitation. "But I believe I have some extremely important information that will shed a great deal more light on what you're investigating." Kayla's eyes widened with surprise and curiosity, while Sean and Rachel immediately focused on this unexpected arrival. Agent Davis rose and gestured to the vacant chair. "Ms. Grant, we're conducting a thorough inquiry into the allegations against Kayla Brooks and Dreamscape. If you have any relevant information, please share it." Helen settled into the chair, her gaze lingering on Kayla for a moment, an unspoken reassurance, before she spoke openly and decisively. "First, you should know I once held a senior role at Global Tech, Inc. I was vice president of investment strategy and led many of the company's merger and acquisition negotiations." The room froze for an instant as every eye turned to the seemingly ordinary older woman. Helen inhaled deeply, a flash of regret and guilt crossing her face, but her voice remained unwavering. "Over time, I realized that behind the glamour and power lay a ruthless strategy. Global Tech didn't just want cutting-edge technologies. They were willing to destroy any smaller company that wouldn't sell at prices far below their true value." Agent Davis nodded, fully grasping the gravity of what Helen was revealing. Kayla gripped her own hand so tightly her knuckles whitened, a wave of anger and hurt surging through her. Helen continued, her tone heavy with remorse. "I resigned from Global Tech 6 months ago, right after I discovered their covert campaign targeting Dreamscape and several other minority-owned startups. Since then, I've quietly gathered every document and piece of evidence detailing their market manipulation tactics, reputation smearing operations, and legal intimidation. Reaching into her purse, she pulled out a small USB drive and placed it carefully on the desk in front of Agent Davis, looking her straight in the eye to underscore her sincerity. Everything you need is on this drive. Internal emails among Global Tech's top executives, minutes from secret meetings with Matthew Barnes and Next Gen Systems, and a detailed plan outlining how they intended to sabotage companies like Dreamscape if they refused the buyout. Agent Davis picked up the USB with a look of resolute focus. She understood that this trove of evidence could not only expose the immediate conspiracy, but also uncover the broader network behind Global Tech's sophisticated attacks. Kayla looked to Helen, gratitude shining in her young voice. "Ms. Grant, I don't know how to thank you." Helen offered a gentle smile, pride and affection in her eyes. "No thanks are necessary. I'm simply doing what I should have done long ago. You and Dreamscape represent a new generation, strong enough to stand up to these injustices. I'm just trying to atone for my past silence." Sean squeezed Kayla's hand, both thankful and newly emboldened for the fight ahead. "We're deeply grateful, Ms. Grant. Your courage and integrity won't just help Dreamscape. They'll protect many other young entrepreneurs from powers like Global Tech." Helen nodded firmly. "I believe in justice. With what Rachel and I have provided, the FBI now has all it needs to uncover the full truth about Global Tech." Agent Davis stood, the USB drive clutched like a vital weapon. "We're committed to a thorough investigation, and will hold every responsible party accountable. The FBI isn't just protecting Kayla Brooks and Dreamscape. It's defending fairness and transparency in America's tech industry." Outside the airport, Matthew Barnes sat in his private car, heart pounding as a call came through from Global Tech's senior leadership. He realized the scheme he'd unwittingly helped set in motion was unraveling, and that the world he once knew, protected by power and money, was beginning to shatter, and there would be no escaping the danger he'd helped create. In the quiet hotel room in downtown San Francisco, Kayla and Sean had just ended an important call with their attorney, Rachel Kim, trying to steady their nerves after a long, stressful day. No sooner had they set the phone down than a tentative knock sounded at the door, and the two exchanged startled, guarded looks. Sean rose quietly and cracked the door open, only to freeze when he realized the man standing there was Matthew Barnes. Gone was his usual arrogance and coldness. Now he looked utterly gaunt, his eyes rimmed with exhaustion and full of regret. "I know I'm the last person you want to see right now," Matthew rasped, his voice rough with tension. "But please, give me a few minutes to explain. I've come to try to make amends for what I did, even if it might be too late." Sean's eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering. But when he glanced at Kayla and saw in her eyes a mix of compassion and curiosity, he reluctantly nodded and stepped aside to let Matthew in. The man who'd caused so much upheaval moved gingerly into the room, each step seeming to carry the weight of his guilt and remorse. Settling onto the sofa, Matthew bowed his head, his trembling hands resting on his knees. After a long pause, he spoke in a low, aching tone. "I want to begin by saying how deeply sorry I am to you, Kayla, and to you, Sean. I did something utterly terrible, something I never imagined I could do." Kayla sat quietly, studying him, her heart trying to understand what could have driven him to inflict such hurt. Sean remained silent at her side, listening intently to Matthew's anguished confession. Matthew drew in a shaky breath and continued. "I placed that false security report about Kayla, claiming forged documents and financial fraud. I did it not just because I was humiliated on the plane, but because I genuinely believed my superiors when they told me that small startups like Dreamscape posed a threat to us. Sean gently squeezed Kayla's hand, his gaze locked on Matthew. So, you were following Global Tech's orders? Matthew nodded slowly, shame flooding his face. More precisely, Next Gen Systems, where I'm a senior director. For years, I thought my duty was to protect the company's interests, even if it meant taking down more talented, up-and-coming startups like Dreamscape. But after what happened on that flight, seeing Kayla's calm courage in the face of my injustice, and the anger and disbelief in everyone's eyes, I realized I was completely wrong. He paused, voice quivering with genuine emotion. When I watched Kayla stand her ground and saw how everyone reacted, I understood that I wasn't safeguarding my company. I was aiding a cruel, unfair scheme. Kayla spoke softly but firmly. Then, why are you here today? Matthew lifted his head and met her gaze with unguarded sincerity. I can't live with this guilt any longer. And more importantly, I've brought internal documents from Next Gen Systems, emails, secret meeting notes, and detailed strategies plotting to destroy Dreamscape and other promising startups founded by people of color. He reached into his leather satchel and extracted a thick dossier, placing it carefully on the coffee table in front of Sean and Kayla, his hands trembling as he opened it. All the proof of their plans is right here. They've been using their power and finances to manipulate the market, spread lies, and mount legal attacks. Exactly what I unwittingly helped facilitate. Sean took the documents, his eyes scanning the pages. He immediately recognized the significance of this evidence, enough for the FBI to dismantle the malicious conspiracy of these powerful firms. Matthew looked at Kayla, regret and earnestness shining in his eyes. Kayla, I know saying sorry can't erase the pain I caused, but I hope you understand how truly remorseful I am. I want to help you and Dreamscape stop this conspiracy, so no one else has to go through what you did. Kayla was silent for a moment, her gaze fixed on him as she absorbed his heartfelt regret. Finally, she nodded gently, her voice quiet yet resolute. I accept your apology, Mr. Barnes. I hope you'll do everything you can to fix this. A flicker of relief crossed Matthew's face, replaced instantly by determination. I promise I will. I've already contacted the FBI and am fully prepared to cooperate in exposing Global Tech and Next Gen Systems. Sean stood and extended his hand to Matthew, an act of forgiveness and a pledge to face the road ahead together. We welcome your cooperation, Barnes, but know this is only the beginning of a long fight. Matthew rose, grasping Sean's hand firmly. Though belated, he now understood that today's actions might be his chance at redemption, and, more importantly, a way to make amends for the harm he'd inflicted on Kayla, Dreamscape, and all the talented young founders he'd once dismissed. Just after Matthew left the hotel room, leaving behind an atmosphere equal parts relief and tension, Kayla fixed her determined gaze on her father. Though she'd endured a whirlwind of pressure and uncertainty, she knew better than anyone that she couldn't let today's hardships shake her long-held dream, making Dreamscape the world's premier digital education platform. The next morning, Kayla and Sean stepped into the gleaming high-rise headquarters of Sun Capital Ventures in San Francisco's financial district, hearts pounding with both nerves and resolve. When the elevator doors slid open, they entered a spacious, elegant boardroom where 12 powerful investors already sat, their sharp eyes mixed with curiosity and skepticism. Kayla inhaled deeply, summoning her composure and confidence. Good morning, everyone, she began in a voice clear and poised beyond her years. I'm Kayla Brooks, founder and CEO of Dreamscape, the digital education platform helping millions of students worldwide access modern, effective learning methods. David Harrington, the senior investor at the center of the table, raised an eyebrow and leaned forward. "Miss Brooks, we don't deny our initial positive impressions of your company, but recent reports of financial misconduct allegations could negatively affect our decision. What is your response?" Unflinching, Kayla replied with absolute calm. "I completely understand your concerns. However, as you know, those allegations were part of a concerted effort to damage Dreamscape's reputation. We've provided the FBI with incontrovertible evidence showing no financial or legal wrongdoing on our part. If anything, these attacks underscore how seriously industry giants view our growing value and potential, and why they felt compelled to try to stop us." A hush fell over the room. Some investors exchanged cautious glances, and Kayla seized the moment. "Rather than dwell on baseless accusations, today I'd like you to focus on what Dreamscape has actually achieved. In just 2 years, we've empowered over 2 million students globally with personalized learning content, significantly boosting academic performance across diverse regions, especially in underserved communities." She tapped the remote, and a large screen behind her lit up with impressive data, soaring growth charts alongside photos from classrooms in India, Kenya, Brazil, and beyond, places where Dreamscape's technology was transforming students' lives and futures. Margaret Foster, the board's notoriously exacting technology investment specialist, leaned in. "We need to know whether your platform can adapt to cultural differences, and, more importantly, how you'll scale it worldwide." Looking directly at her, Kayla's voice brimmed with confidence and clarity. Dreamscape is more than a typical e-learning site. It's an adaptive ecosystem that tailors content and teaching methods in real time based on user data. That allows us to customize each course and lesson to the unique needs of every community in every country. Jason Reynolds, a younger investor, frowned. "You say it's self-adapting. How do you ensure your algorithms truly improve learning outcomes?" Without hesitation, Kayla answered, "We've developed proprietary AI that closely tracks students' behaviors and responses during each session. In field tests, it's proven to boost learning efficiency by up to 40% and greatly increase knowledge retention. I believe Sun Capital Ventures will see Dreamscape's immense value, not just in financial returns but in social impact." For nearly 2 hours, Kayla faced relentless, probing questions from the panel, but she never wavered. Every answer was backed by clear data, transparency, and authenticity. When her presentation concluded, Mr. Harrington regarded her thoughtfully. "Miss Brooks, you've made a remarkably strong impression today. We'll need time to deliberate, but I can say it's rare to see a founder, especially one your age, present so cogently and persuasively." Kayla returned his gaze with a sincere, grateful smile. "Thank you, and the entire board for listening. I believe Sun Capital Ventures would be an ideal partner to help us build a brighter educational future for millions of students around the world." As they exited the boardroom, Kayla and Sean walked down a long, sunlit corridor, the daylight streaming through panoramic windows lending the space an air of clarity and hope. Sean gently laid a hand on Kayla's shoulder, pride shining in his eyes. "No matter the outcome, I want you to know how proud I am, Kayla. Not everyone has your strength to do what you did today." Kayla smiled, her eyes alight with determination and faith in tomorrow. "I know we'll succeed, Dad. This is only the first step, and I'll need to stay stronger still because many more challenges await." Meanwhile, in another part of the city, senior leaders at Global Tech and NextGen Systems were feeling the mounting pressure as the FBI edged ever closer to exposing the dark conspiracies they'd spent so long hiding. They realized that the fight ahead would not be easy, and that Kayla Brooks, the young girl they once dismissed, had become their greatest threat, not only to their profits, but to the very unethical values they'd built their empires on. Less than 24 hours after that grueling meeting, Kayla and Sean were summoned back to Sun Capital Ventures' sleek offices. This time, the atmosphere was completely different. The earlier tension had given way to warmth and openness from the board members. As Kayla stepped inside, she immediately spotted a familiar face seated at the head of the table. Helen Grant, now a new member of Sun Capital's board. Helen offered Kayla a gentle smile, her eyes kind yet resolute. She was the first to speak, breaking the hush in the room. The Sun Capital Board has conducted a thorough review of all the evidence and information Kayla provided. I'm delighted to announce that Dreamscape will receive our full investment support. Kayla's heart raced with surprise and joy. She glanced at her father and saw relief shining in his eyes. David Harrington, the board's chairman, spoke next in a warm, authoritative tone. Kayla, our decision is based not only on Dreamscape's impressive metrics, but also on the character and determination you've shown in overcoming recent challenges. He paused, fixing her with a steady gaze. We understand Dreamscape faces threats from powerful players like Global Tech. As investors, we won't stop at financial backing. I hereby declare that Sun Capital stands firmly behind Dreamscape and will defend the company against any attack. Helen Grant nodded, her expression proud and supportive. I worked closely with Global Tech's senior leadership, so I know they don't abandon their ambitions lightly. But now they're not facing a lone, fledgling startup. They're up against all of us, a united alliance committed to justice and the values Dreamscape embodies. Kayla felt a warmth she hadn't known in days. For the first time since the smear campaign began, she felt truly safe and empowered by the steadfast support around her. Margaret Foster, who had asked some of the toughest questions during the last meeting, now spoke with sincerity. I want to emphasize that our investment is not driven solely by profit. We see the profound social and educational impact Dreamscape is creating. Kayla, you've won us over with your integrity, intelligence, and vision. Jason Reynolds, the younger director who had doubted Dreamscape's potential, added with genuine respect, We've received official confirmation from the FBI regarding the investigation into Global Tech and next-gen systems. The evidence provided by Kayla, attorney Rachel Kim, and Ms. Grant proves the previous allegations were baseless and part of an organized sabotage effort. Sun Capital will never tolerate such unethical competition. Helen Grant's voice hardened with a clear warning. We will not only back Kayla and Dreamscape financially and legally, but will also expose Global Tech's wrongdoing publicly if necessary. The message is clear. Innovative startups, especially those built by young ethical founders, will never fight malicious schemes alone. Moved, Kayla stood and bowed slightly to the board. I am deeply grateful for Sun Capital's vote of confidence. I promise to honor the trust you've placed in me and in Dreamscape. This is a pivotal moment for us, and it will reshape the battle against these destructive tactics. Sean stood beside her, pride and gratitude evident in his eyes. On behalf of the Brooks family and everyone at Dreamscape, thank you, Sun Capital Ventures, for this courageous and wise decision. We will not let you down. Mr. Harrington rose, extending his hand to both of them. Consider Sun Capital your true partner. We believe Dreamscape will not only deliver strong returns, but also build a more innovative, equitable future for education around the world. As Kayla and Sean left the boardroom, they felt a tremendous weight lifted from their shoulders. Kayla looked up at the brilliant San Francisco sky, her heart brimming with renewed confidence and hope. "Dad, I feel like we've just won a major battle, but I also know the war isn't over." Sean squeezed her hand, voice firm with determination. "You're right, Kayla. But now we're not fighting alone. We have strength, allies, and the truth on our side. No matter how powerful global tech thinks it is, it can't overcome unity and justice." Meanwhile, at Global Tech's headquarters, senior leaders were feeling the mounting pressure of the FBI investigation. They knew that Sun Capital and Dreamscape had forged an unbreakable alliance, and that the dark conspiracies they'd buried for so long were on the verge of being exposed. Just as Kayla and Sean walked out of Sun Capital's offices, hundreds of miles away at the FBI's San Francisco headquarters, Special Agent Laura Davis stood before a massive investigation board, its surface crisscrossed with photos, notes, and arrows linking Global Tech's key players to a web of serious illegal activities. Her gaze was steely and unflinching, aware that this wasn't just an ordinary case. It was a battle against shadowy, powerful forces manipulating America's tech industry. She looked around at her colleagues, dozens of agents bustling to prepare for the largest operation they'd ever mounted, and spoke with crisp authority, her words declaring open war. "Today, we're not investigating a run-of-the-mill company. Global Tech is a tech titan with vast influence, but we have solid proof they've orchestrated complex securities fraud, corporate espionage, and, most egregiously, a campaign to destroy minority-founded startups, Dreamscape being just one target." A young agent raised his hand, determination in his eyes. "Agent Davis, the arrest warrants for their top executives are ready. We're awaiting your go-ahead." Laura nodded sharply, her resolve absolute. "Then move out immediately. I want this operation executed flawlessly. No room for error." Minutes later, fleets of FBI vehicles rolled out from headquarters, fanning out across San Francisco to strategic targets, most notably Global Tech's imposing downtown headquarters. Inside Global Tech's sleek boardroom, senior executives scrambled to contain a fast-spreading media crisis. Chairman Robert Sinclair, face drawn and furious, stared at his subordinates. "Who leaked our internal files? How did the FBI obtain our most confidential plans?" No one dared answer. Panic rippled through the room, then the door burst open. Agent Davis, flanked by her team and clutching arrest warrants, strode in with icy determination. "FBI, we have warrants for your arrests on charges of securities fraud, corporate espionage, and plotting to undermine minority-founded startups." Sinclair leapt to his feet, pallid but still defiant. "You don't know what you're doing, Agent Davis. We have the country's top lawyers and powerful friends in Washington." Davis held his gaze unblinking, voice like steel. "I know exactly what we're doing, Mr. Sinclair. Testimony from insiders, including Matthew Barnes and especially former VP Helen Grant, provides more than enough evidence to convict you and your co-conspirators. Don't think you can evade justice." Simultaneously, FBI teams raided other executives' offices, seizing hard drives, confidential emails, and other critical evidence. Within an hour, headlines blazed across every news outlet. Global Tech's top brass led away in handcuffs. Shock rippled through the tech world as investors realized the very company they'd idolized was behind unconscionable, unethical crimes. Back at their San Francisco hotel, Kayla and Sean watched the coverage in stunned relief. Kayla covered her mouth, a mix of disbelief and triumph in her voice. "Dad, they're finally being arrested." Sean wrapped her in a proud hug. "You did this, Kayla. Your courage helped bring them down. Now, Dreamscape and every small company pushed aside by global tech will have their day in the sun. Elsewhere, in his apartment, Matthew Barnes watched the broadcast with haunted eyes and a shaky smile. Regret still gnawed at him, but he knew he'd done the right thing by cooperating and turning over the evidence that exposed his former employer's crimes. In another part of town, Helen Grant stood quietly before her TV, relief washing over her as she saw her former colleagues, those she once trusted, finally held to account. She whispered to herself, "The fight isn't over, but today, justice won." Back at the FBI, Agent Davis returned to headquarters, the operation complete. Her eyes were fierce but unsatisfied, voice resolute. "Today, we did something monumental, not just for small businesses but to send a message. No one, no matter how wealthy or powerful, is above the law." And as global tech's empire crumbled, a new era dawned in America's tech industry, one where integrity and fair competition would no longer be optional, but the standard every entrepreneur could expect. Shortly after the global tech scandal broke, shocking the entire country, Kayla returned to her hometown of Detroit to prepare for a pivotal event in Dreamscape's journey. Against a backdrop of excitement and hope, the grand auditorium at the Detroit Community Innovation Center was lavishly decorated, ready to welcome hundreds of honored guests, educators, investors, journalists, and, most importantly, thousands of eager students excited to see the new technology. Under the bright stage lights, Kayla stepped forward to a roaring ovation, her heart pounding, eyes shining with pride and conviction. Standing beside her was Sean Brooks, her father and Dreamscape's steadfast supporter, who smiled warmly and squeezed her hand gently. "Today is your day, Kayla," he whispered. "I've always believed in you, and I'm so proud." Kayla nodded, then climbed the podium. Though only 11 years old, she carried herself with the poise and confidence of a seasoned leader who had overcome enormous challenges. Scanning the vast audience, she paused to acknowledge familiar faces: Attorney Rachel Kim, Special Agent Laura Davis, Helen Grant, and the Sun Capital Ventures board members, all gathered not just to celebrate Dreamscape's success but to honor its deeply human mission. "My warmest welcome to everyone attending Dreamscape's Global Education Program launch," Kayla began, her voice clear, strong, and heartfelt. "This marks not only a milestone for our company, but a declaration of belief and hope. Belief that technology can change the world, and hope that every child, no matter where they come from, deserves access to the very best education." Thunderous applause filled the hall as the large screen behind her displayed moving images from classrooms around the globe. Kenya, India, Brazil, even under-resourced rural communities in the U.S., where Dreamscape's pilot programs had exceeded all expectations. The students' faces lit up with joy and optimism, testament to a brighter future made possible by this innovation. In that moment, Kayla introduced a special guest, prompting gasps of surprise. "I'd like to bring on someone many of us once felt anger toward. Today, he stands here as living proof of transformation, remorse, and faith in goodness." The stage doors swung open to reveal Matthew Barnes. He walked forward hesitantly, his posture heavy with shame, yet his eyes sincere. The audience fell silent, all eyes fixed on him. Stopping beside Kayla, Matthew took a steadying breath and spoke with a voice thick with emotion. "I know I don't deserve to be here after what I did, but I want, before all of you, to express my deepest apologies to Kayla, her family, and the entire Dreamscape team. My greatest mistake was letting prejudice and greed overshadow my own moral compass." He paused and looked at Kayla with profound gratitude. But Kayla taught me the most invaluable lesson. True strength doesn't lie in power or money, but in compassion, wisdom, and resilience. The very person I once dismissed and hurt gave me the chance to change, to atone for my wrongs. Kayla regarded him calmly, her voice gentle yet firm. I believe everyone deserves a second chance. Dreamscape isn't just about technology or education. It's about helping each other become better human beings. Matthew Barnes, standing here today, exemplifies that. The crowd erupted once more, and for the first time, Matthew felt genuine solace from those he had once scorned. Turning back to her audience, Kayla unveiled Dreamscape's expansion plan to roll out the program across 27 countries, focusing on the most underserved communities where digital education can make the greatest impact. When she concluded, the entire hall rose in a standing ovation, including Helen Grant, who had quietly gathered the evidence that toppled global tech. After the ceremony, Special Agent Laura Davis approached Kayla with a proud smile. Today, you showed that age is no barrier to greatness. Congratulations, Kayla. Kayla returned her smile, gratitude shining in her eyes. Thank you, Agent Davis. Without the FBI's persistence and pursuit of justice, none of this would be possible. Laura nodded, pride glowing in her expression. You've inspired all of us. Not far away, Matthew stood quietly watching, deeply moved. Though his future bore uncertainty, he knew he was beginning a new chapter grounded in genuine remorse and integrity. Beside him, Sean Brooks observed his daughter with overwhelming pride and gratitude. He understood that today was not only Dreamscape's triumph, but Kayla's coming of age, a testament to courage, forgiveness, and innovation. And he knew this was only the first of many extraordinary steps she would take, opening doors for millions of young learners around the world. As the applause died down, Kayla stood center stage, her thoughtful gaze sweeping the audience. Her recent experiences hadn't just changed her life. They'd cast light on deep, persistent issues in our society that people often won't admit but still endure: racism, prejudice, and injustice. Taking a deep breath, her eyes more resolute than ever, she addressed the crowd in a clear, powerful voice. Ladies and gentlemen, over the past few weeks, I've been on a journey I never could have imagined. It started with something as small as an airplane seat, but it was much bigger than that. It became a journey against prejudice and injustice that so many of us face every single day. The room fell silent. Everyone leaned in, knowing exactly what she meant. Those invisible barriers that bite us all too sharply. What I went through wasn't just a minor personal dispute, she continued, emotion in her tone but steely resolve beneath it. It was a vivid reflection of the racism and entrenched bias in our society. I, a young black girl of 11, became a target not only because of my success, but because someone thought I didn't deserve it. She paused, looking at the students in the front rows, whose eyes shone with empathy. Her voice softened, encouraging them. But I'm not here today to dwell on injustice. I'm here to tell you we can rise above it. Prejudice cannot defeat intellect, persistence, and courage. What I've learned on this journey is this: never give up, no matter how unfair the world may be. Her gaze drifted to Matthew Barnes. Standing quietly at the edge of the stage, his head bowed in shame, yet reflecting genuine respect. Take Mr. Barnes here. Once someone who hurt me deeply, yet today he stands as proof that people can change. We cannot erase the past, but we can learn from it. We can choose forgiveness and move forward to create a future where everyone is treated fairly, where talent and creativity matter more than race or age. Matthew bowed his head, moved. For the first time, he felt the healing power of true forgiveness and the courage to face his own mistakes. Kayla turned back to the young people before her, her eyes ablaze with inspiration. Remember this: the road to success is always paved with challenges. There will be those who say you're not good enough, not capable, or that you don't belong. But believe in yourself and keep pushing forward. No one can stop you. Dreamscape is more than just a tech app, she emphasized, her voice rich with conviction. It stands for change. It shows that when we pursue our passions with determination, the world must adapt to us. A thunderous ovation erupted. Kayla paused, tears in her eyes, then pressed on, her voice stronger than ever. I stand here not only as Dreamscape's CEO, but as a friend and ally to every young person out there. Each one of us has the power to do something amazing. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Never give up on your dreams, because when those dreams come true, they don't just change your life, they change countless others. She looked back at her father, Sean, waiting behind the curtain. He beamed with pride as she spoke her final words, gratitude in her voice. My dad always told me that every step on our journey counts, even the hardest ones. Today, I realize how true that is. It's those challenges we overcome that forge our deepest strength. When she finished, the entire auditorium rose to its feet, applause and cheers drowning out everything else. Many wiped away tears, moved not just by her story, but by the hope, courage, and belief in tomorrow she shared. Matthew Barnes stepped forward, looking Kayla in the eyes for the first time, with both humility and sincerity. Kayla, you've taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. Thank you for forgiving me and giving me a chance to make things right. Kayla returned his gaze with a warm, powerful smile. Mr. Barnes, what matters is not who you were, but who you choose to be. You're part of the change we all seek. As the celebration wound down, Kayla stepped off stage, knowing she'd accomplished more than a successful launch. She'd touched hundreds of hearts and inspired them. She understood her journey was far from over, but also knew this: if each of us has the courage to stand up against prejudice, injustice, and racism, we can forge a world that's far more just and compassionate. And that, she realized, is life's greatest triumph. Kayla Brooks's story isn't just an extraordinary tale of an 11-year-old defying prejudice. It's a powerful reminder that each of us can drive real change in the world. What do you think of her actions and her forgiveness of Matthew Barnes? Could you do the same in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story meaningful and inspiring, please like and share to spread the positive message, and subscribe to the channel to join us for more uplifting stories in the future.